We are excited to feature this growth stage startup. Joining us is Daniel Katz, CEO of Orbital Sidekick. Thanks for joining this panel.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So maybe a good starting point is tell us about your startup and specifically what big problem are you trying to solve?
Yeah, so tagline for Orbital Sidekick, we provide global persistent monitoring services by leveraging hyperspectral satellites. And we use these satellites to provide monitoring services to the energy sector. And we also have defense customers as well. But mainly our initial target focus is to provide this global persistent monitoring service to oil and gas pipelines. And what we're looking at here is, so using satellites and this really high-tech sensor technology with hyperspectral to look at preventing and identifying leaks from pipelines. There's also a regulatory compliance side where the government regulates how pipelines are monitored on a routine basis. So service, we can effectively monitor our customers' assets on a routine daily basis to help them on the regulatory side, but also on the environmental side. And at the end of the day, pipelines are a logistics business. So if we can help the operator prevent leaks from happening in the first place, that helps their business in the long run. So really, it's kind of what we're doing here within the broader space. I mean, and you know, I'm notice here I'm not on track one, we're on track two, right? And looking at how we're leveraging space assets on the satellite side, but we're using it very specifically for really critical use case on the energy side. And so it's monitoring these energy assets with pipelines. But you know, there's an environmental aspect to it. And I also want to emphasize that this oil and gas pipeline monitoring we're doing today is really just an initial foray into energy infrastructure monitoring. We're also looking at energy exploration. And not just traditional exploration in the sense of oil and gas and looking for the next like Permian or Bakken, but also new energy explorations. There's panelists on here before talking about the new hydrogen economy. That's something that we hope that we can be a large part of here moving forward, where we can do exploration for hydrogen, looking for natural hydrogen fields, also looking at energy storage materials like lithium and cobalt. Our satellites are really well geared towards that type of exploration as well. So there's a whole host of things that we can do. But again, really starting initially with energy infrastructure monitoring and oil and gas pipelines. But the world's our oyster, as we like to kind of say here, because we do have this global persistent monitoring platform in the form of satellites. So lots of exciting stuff on the horizon.
You know, Daniel, earlier today, we had a session with ITU World Bank and another major Wall Street bank as well. And as we talked about ESG and sustainability, particularly around the operating principles for impact management, I think where things are moving towards is around disclosure and reports, but more standardization, but ultimately comes down to measurement, metrics, and the ability to actually report out on the commitment. Right. Mm-hmm. So there's a greater emphasis that's swinging over to the metrics. How much carbon are you emitting? How much carbon are you reducing? And how much carbon are you actually capturing? So that's an important piece. So going back to the oil and gas initial kind of beachhead vertical that you guys are focusing on, can you give us some volumes in terms of the kind of greenhouse and the carbon emission from these operations that it's causing? And if we could even reduce a portion of that, what does that mean in terms of overall carbon footprint reduction?
Right. Well, 40% of methane leaks within the broader oil and gas industry come from pipelines. So being able to help prevent those leaks from happening in the first place, all of a sudden you're 40% reduction in your greenhouse gas emissions on the methane side. So what we're really critical, I think quantification is very important. I agree on that. And so that's, I think, a host of companies that are really targeted towards that are really looking at identifying super emitters and quantifying volumetrically how much methane is being emitted or other greenhouse gases. we have the ability to do that as well with our company, and we can quantify and identify these methane emissions. I think getting kind of like jumping to the natural next step, though, as well, is preventing these from occurring in the first place. Because that's the ultimate goal. I mean, yes, quantifying is important. You have to identify, but you also need to prevent, because that's ultimately what you're doing. So it's the combination of the two. So that's what we are focusing on. So we take a bit more of a binary approach or a thresholding approach to how, when we identify leaks or potential leaks that could happen, or early stage leaks, and then really trying to provide near real time information to the operator so they can help prevent or stop the leaks from occurring as quickly as possible. And so it's and you can work within a broader system of systems here. So we can collaborate with other operators that have higher fidelity quantification metrics, tools at their disposal, and so we can to really provide a more kind of a broader approach to this whole monitoring service. But ultimately, we know, I mean, for the most part, we know where the super emitters are. We know who the bad actors are. So now it's about taking action. How can we help prevent things from occurring in the first place? How can we help really stop this from occurring and greatly reduce these emissions? And then the other side of things as well that we're focusing on is it's not just the methane is a very hot button topic right now, and rightly so. But the other side that we're looking at is what other methods can we use to help reduce the global carbon footprint. And one thing that we've identified, or one thing you can see, and it's in the data, 20% of the carbon footprint on an annual basis is from global wildfires, and that's that's doubly bad, right? It's because not only when there's massive wildfires and a majority of them are man-made, those are obviously huge quantities of carbon, of CO2 into the atmosphere, or CO2 equivalent. But not only that, but you're destroying your greatest carbon sequestration tool, which is forests and trees. So what we're also looking at and using our satellites for is to monitor for high risk areas, so that governments, both regional and local and national, can actually target the high risk areas, so you can allocate your resource more effectively and more efficiently. I'm also working with utility companies like PG&E here in California, helping to prevent the next big wildfire by identifying where the high risk areas are. So I think it's, one thing we've really tried to do here at Orbital Sidekick, and I think is really just look at how can we come down to, how can we get to real tangible solutions. I do think that quantifying methane has a place. It's a job that I think the government's doing actually a really good job with that too. JPL, EDF, there's NOAA. There's other agencies that are doing a really good job. I think for companies like us, I think we can actually come in and provide action on the back of that. So I think that's where people are. I think we're going to see a lot of growth in that area.
Yeah. And again, I appreciate you providing that distinction. I think when we think about some of the gas leaks or even accidents, including explosions, like I think it was in I want to say San Carlos, California, for instance, is that it's both the deterioration of infrastructure, but also it's a maintenance issue, right? So being able to prevent means that the potential harm and the exposure of those greenhouse, including methane and others, gets reduced significantly. Same with the forest fire, is the ability to be able to actually zone in terms of where are the pockets of the wild, kind of rural area or forest areas that shows a certain level of dryness, for example, or certain decay, for instance. Which brings me to the core technology, because I think for some of the viewers or those that are on this platform are probably asking the question of what is hyperspectra and how does it actually work, and what kind of nuance does it provide? Again, I mean, I think we talked about it's upwards of hundreds of different bands, but if you could just kind of go into the science of it, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of gloss over that a bit on purpose, because hyperspectral is not the most wieldy technology, but it is important to kind of understand background. I mean, we have a room of PhDs that work on analyzing a lot of the data behind it, but and so we don't put that onus on customers or end users, right? So a big part of our platform is to collect, analyze, and extract actionable information from these data sets. But just as you said, Scott, we're basically, I like to start by talking about hyperspectral. I talk about what it's not, and what it's not is like the photo that you take with your iPhone, right? Where basically you're looking at light captured in the visible light spectrum of the electromagnetic spectrum, and you look at 3 wide color bands: red, green, and blue. Those are combined together, and that's things that you get on your phone or on your computer screen. And really all you're getting from that is spatial data. You're seeing shapes and a few colors. And so you're very limited. You got to get 3 data points per pixel. With hyperspectral, what you're doing is you're capturing hundreds of color bands in the visible through infrared light regions. And so we're getting hundreds of data points per pixel. And really, and the critical thing here is that everything reflects and absorbs light in a unique fashion. So what we're able to see with all of these color bands is we get this reflectance curve. And so with the reflectance curve, with all the peaks and valleys, it's kind of a chemical fingerprint for every object in our data set. So it's a really, it's a new way, so we're not relying on spatial or color features. We're looking at reflectance and absorption properties. And that allows us to really fine tune with how we employ different machine learning techniques and neural network techniques to look at different features that you're kind of seeing the unseen, if you will. And so that hyperspectral is really powerful in that way, because we're looking at data in a way, it makes sense from the computer, from the human eye, but from a computer, we're getting orders of magnitude more data in each data set. And we finally have the computing power to kind of catch up to that and be able to extract information at scale, at speed, and provide value to our end users. So, if we're chemically fingerprinting things, and that's really good for the energy sector, it's good for environmental purposes, good for the defense sector. It's really, there's lots of broad applications that can be utilized from it. So it's a really powerful tool. It's been around for a while, but it hasn't been until really today until it's been able to scale and commercialize.
Now, Daniel, you alluded to that others on your team that can go into much more deeply on the science side. Can you give us a quick overview of the team in terms of the leaders and some of the key engineers?
Sure. So for our team, so we're a rapid growing team, right? So we are kind of hitting the inflection point of kind of emerging from my basement in San Francisco, where we started a few years ago, and now we've actually doubled the size of the team in the last 4 months. So we'll probably double again by next year. Really, what we're looking for, I mean, I always say the number one criteria for hiring people on our team is just bringing smart, creative people aboard. And because I love that term. I think that if you can get smart, creative people, you're going to do really well. But of course, when you're dealing with putting satellites up in orbit, you need engineers. When you're dealing with hyperspectral data sets, you need some subject matter experts and some PhDs who've handled this type of data and know how to do data science and extract the information. So the leadership team really has a pretty diverse background. We've got folks who have built dozens of satellites. We have folks who have delved deep into hyperspectral. We have folks who are deeply embedded in the energy sector. We have folks who are deeply embedded in the defense sector, and kind of everything in between. And as we continue to grow, it'll be about building out the product management side of things as we enter into new markets. Less on the, we're not a satellite house, so we don't have a big manufacturing arm. It's really more on the building the analytics engine, building the back end and the front end of our end user product and product development. And so that's where a lot of our growth is coming from these days.
So talk about some of the major milestones that you've achieved so far.
Right. So a lot of it has to do with so we had our first satellite mission, or our first space mission that went to the International Space Station back in 2018. So that was a big milestone for us, just to get an asset into space. It takes a lot of effort to get there, and once you do that, you're kind of planting your flag in the proverbial space there, and allows you to get a data pipeline so that you can start analyzing all terabytes of hyperspectral data and turning around a data product for your customers. So that was kind of a critical milestone for us. We're continuing to develop our space infrastructure right now. So we are. I realize I'm starting to sound more like the other space track, but this is all really critical, right? We're putting together more satellites as we speak. So we have another satellite launching in June, and we have 6 more satellites launching in the first half of 2022. And what this does is it allows us to service our energy customers, and that's the really important milestone, or the customer milestone. So we have contracts with over a dozen of the largest pipeline operators in North America to provide initial pipeline monitoring service. We're looking at expanding into the mining sector. So we have some initial connections within the broader international mining community to provide monitoring services there as well. A lot the fire fuel product I mentioned will be deployed in the second half of this year, just in time for fire season here in Northern California. So those are kind of the critical milestones that we're ramping up to, and so 2021 and the first half of 2022 will be really critical as we continue to build our infrastructure and really fully commercialize our business plan.
So can you tell us about your existing investors on the cap table and why they chose to invest in you?
Sure. So our seed round was led by a company called Allied Minds, publicly traded on the London Stock Exchange, actually. And they had a strong space thesis, and they've also invested in Hawkeye 360 and Bridgecom. For the A round, that was led by Temasek, the Singaporean fund. And what they actually specifically invested out of their ESG fund, or ESG group, which is kind of a new, ESG is obviously kind of a very emerging, becoming very emerging importance for many organizations. And so Temasek is fully buying into that, and we're one of the first investments out of that group. So they certainly see the value that we bring as we are providing monitoring services for traditional energy infrastructure, but also looking at new clean energy exploration and environmental monitoring. So that was a really important indicator for them, and we're the horse they're kind of betting on there.
And what's your next round, and what are you looking to raise, and the general timing of that?
So we're just kind of finally dotting the I's and crossing the T's on getting the last round behind us. Looking forward, it's a very exciting time in both in clean energy and the space sector. There's certainly a lot of talk around companies using various new financing vehicles like SPACs and things like that. So it's been an interesting roller coaster ride over the last few months as we continue to evaluate that. So we have been, everyone always says that the best time to raise a round is right after you close a round. We're certainly looking at all the opportunities that are on the table for us as we continue to grow. And I think what's exciting is that because we already have this infrastructure that's being built right now, we do have, what we can do is we can ingest more capital today and accelerate some plans on product development for new markets. And so that's what we're evaluating right at this time. So it's possible that we might accept some more capital here in the next few months, or wait towards the end of this year. But certainly, I think now is a good time to accelerate some growth plans here, and that's what we're evaluating.
Interesting. All right, let me go ahead and open it up to our investor community to see if they have any questions. If you do, go ahead and click on the raise a hand button. I believe it's on the bottom of your screen, and you will be brought up to the screen to ask your question. While we're waiting for people to ask questions, in regards to going after additional vertical markets, you talked about kind of the bigger let's say, the energy market from a kind of value end, right? So right now, the current focus is around prevention or prediction, and being able to have early detection of potential leakage, right? But when you look at the entire energy market, what are the kinds of pockets of opportunities that you foresee?
Well, I think clean energy exploration is a big one, and we're certainly investing heavily in our development on that side. I also think that certainly with this new administration, the regulatory side is going to continue to gain momentum. But I think it's really about how can you leverage regulatory requirements, and not just as so that the monitoring that comes from regulatory, not just as a checkbox, and not saying, okay, this is a checkbox exercise for us to perform this regulatory exercise, but extracting real tangible value from it. Energy operators are smart about this, and they so the more value that you can offer as not only checking the regulatory box, but also adding additional value to increase uptime and decrease latency, or be able to add real value to your bottom line. So energy companies, they want to make money, they want to make money over saving money. So how do we make them more money while also checking regulatory boxes? That's something that we are continuing to explore.
Yeah, and I think that's another important distinction, and I think every industry kind of differs, right? So the story of cost savings isn't necessarily the most compelling one for that industry. Again, if you have questions on the platform side, please go ahead and raise your hand. In the meantime, for those on the platform as well as watching on live stream, please go ahead and also click on the link to the startup evaluation for Orbital Sidekick while we're continuing and wrapping up the set of conversation here. It's interesting in terms of exploration of new types of energy sources. You mentioned hydrogen. You mentioned also, does that include minerals as well, like lithium, for example, cobalt, and other precious metals?
That's correct, and it's something that we're exploring. So we haven't fully dived headfirst into it as of this time, but it's certainly something that hyperspectral has been used for in the past, just not at any real scale. So this is part of what I had mentioned before, which was that we are now entering Orbital Sidekick can make it now possible to have this scalable commercial solution or we can make hyperspectral scalable and commercial. So we can apply that to energy storage material exploration, lithium and cobalt. We can also look at it for other rare earth elements in general. And so, yeah, people have used, there have been surveys done in parts of Australia using airborne hyperspectral sensors for small swaths, but it takes a long time. You're looking at a lot of different features you have to look at, and these features can change over time, because ultimately hyperspectral doesn't have X-ray vision where you're looking, you can look, hundreds of meters into the ground, looking at surface features that would indicate underlying, features underground, and those features may not, those can change over time. So having a global, persistent monitor platform that can have repeat data over certain sites and be able to see that change over time is really going to give you better insight about what's buried underground, and that's a lot more valuable to our customers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, thinking about the use of muon, cosmic rays that are able to penetrate deeper into the ground to get at density, right? And the density gives clues in terms of what kind of potential minerals could be in terms of large deposits. There are limitations, like you said, around the hyperspectral in terms of the depth and the level of accuracy, because you are in some ways kind of inferring from the characteristics or the feature set from the surface level in terms of the reflective aspects of the absorption of light. So what are your thoughts in terms of also considering ingesting or working with other types of data providers to get, additional sets of insights that, just hyperspectral on your own may not be able to get full kind of not just a 360, but let's say deeper Earth types of analysis?
Well, I think it's necessary, and so we certainly do not limit ourselves to, we aren't saying that hyperspectral is the end all be all and will solve every and all problems. I think that's a very myopic way of viewing, and there's no perfect tool, right? So we recognize it is a system of systems. So we are eager to continue to partner with other data providers to provide a more holistic solution, and we are evaluating. We actually have multiple. We have more than one sensor type on our next satellites going up as well. So we can use different data sets, but hyperspectral is kind of the backbone for us, and a lot of the architecture is built around that. But so we can either coordinate or continue to evolve and develop new sensing technologies. So, one of the interesting, we're bringing someone on right now who previously worked for JPL, who worked on a lot of Mars missions. And so she's been, she leverages both high spectral data, she's looked at radar data, she's looked at all sorts, ingesting all sorts of information to help infer what's underneath the surface of Mars. So certainly it's something that's I think vital. And if any, I don't think any, I hope that Earth observation at this point, or any remote sensing technology that's looking at any sector, I hope they're not so myopic in their views that they think that their technology is the end all be all.